I start?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone here has their own eating habits and lifestyles, but I'm here to tell you why being vegan and vegetarian and having this diet and lifestyle is much better than being a meat eater and a dairy consumer. I understand that ice cream and milkshakes and hamburgers are really good tasting wise, but in the long run, your body and our planet and the animals, most importantly, will thank you. And to start off with, your health, by being vegan and vegetarian, you have a lower chance of getting cancer and sick and chronic illnesses, and it helps with your bone health and lowers your risk of heart disease, as well as many more benefits, but the list goes on and on. And heart disease kills Americans every single day, and by switching over to this diet, it can help lower that, because in red meat there's this long chemical word, but it's called TMAO, and it's basically a bacteria found in the gut of the digestion system, and having too much of it can cause problems in your heart, as well as cholesterol can also be a big part of heart disease. Clotting, it can cause clotting in the blood, and red meat is very fatty, so that's a big contribution to heart disease, as well as obesity. And so to compare a person who's on a plant-based diet versus a like a red meat diet, or just eating meat in general, it's their TMAO levels are 3 times higher than a person who's just on a plant-based diet, so it's a big difference. And not only that, it lowers, being plant-based and vegetarian lowers your risk of chronic illnesses like diabetes and obesity, just like common colds, and just like all sorts of illnesses, because being plant-based and vegetarian, your diet is mostly fruits, vegetables, and nuts. So it's packed with nutrients and antioxidants that fight off radical cells in your body that prevent cancer. So your health is very important, and just making that small step can help improve your health. It also helps, by switching over to this diet, it also helps with the planet. Animals emit greenhouse gases, and 70% of the gases in the air are from the animals. And it's not just the animals, it's the start to finish process. So killing them in like the slaughterhouses, those like emit gases, and their waste, which also pollutes the air. And if you live near a farm, you're more prone to irritation and immune problems, because the gases are very harmful for us humans. They have toxic chemicals in them. And animals need lots of water, and it's very wasteful, the amount of water that we use for the animals. I mean, to put in perspective, humans need to drink 8 cups of water every single day, and a cow can drink up to 50 gallons a day, but when they're dehydrated, it's 2 times more. So being in these slaughterhouses and being dehydrated, they need way more water. And to make dairy, 1 gallon of milk, it takes 683 gallons of water to produce, and it takes 2,400 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. So that's a lot of water. And if you switch over to being vegan and vegetarian, you can, an average vegan saves over 200,000 gallons of water every year. And if even if you're like vegetarian, stay them out. And lastly, this diet saves the animals, and that's what's mostly important. The animals are usually confined into small areas and stuck in like boxes and cages, and they have limited space to move. So just imagine where you are now, you can't move. That's what it's like for them. They can't really go outside. And for cows, just to make meat, it's a horrifying process. When the calf is born, they're separated from their mothers 12 hours. They're separated from their mother 12 hours after they're born, and the mothers are being used for milk right after, and the calves are then fed a special milk replacer to fatten them up for meat and also dairy in the long run. So an average cow can live up to 4 to 5 years in this industry, but compared to a free-range cow, it's like 22 years. So it's a huge difference on a cow's life. And not just about dairy and meat, it's also the hens and the chickens. Chickens in this industry lay up to 30 times the amount of eggs than normal, and they are usually de-beaked and have broken bones due to the cruel environment that they're in. So don't get fooled by like the cage-free and free-range products. No matter what, they're being killed and being thrown in horrible conditions and being killed in cruel ways. So overall, by switching over to being vegan and vegetarian and just making that small change, it's much better than being a meat eater, because you're saving the animals and you're saving the planet, and also it helps with your health. I want to cry.
Why do you want to cry?
That was so much talking. I only used my notes once. I feel pretty good.
Well, then you shouldn't want to cry. You feel good.
I know, but like I don't want to hear your criticism, low key.
That's where your anxiety comes from, huh?
Yeah, I know.
All right.
Do you have any tissues?
I don't think we have a tissue box in here.
We used to keep tissue.
Oh, it's okay. I'll go to the bathroom later.
We used to keep tissue boxes in the classroom, and they just would disappear. And the dean decided that we didn't need to be everybody's medical supply house. Didn't want to keep paying for all that stuff. So.
The school doesn't give it to you for free?
Well, somebody's got to pay for it.
That's what my tuition's for.
Yeah. You want your tuition to be paying for everybody's tissue? Or would you like to have an additional class available someplace? I said, well, let's get an additional class.
Is this class usually this small?
Yes,
Oh
it
my God.
is. We are 17 is all that's still enrolled, and I'm lucky most days if 12 show up on a day. You know, it's a little narrower. All right. You clearly state what your position is. I think you need to have a more interesting attention device. There's a good preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. When you get to the first point on health issues, there's a lot of assumptions there. I think you need to cite your sources a bit more. The explanation about TMAO is okay. You've got a statistical relationship that you present in the argument at one point that says that that's 3 times higher in people who consume meat, and I'm going, okay, so is there a statistical relationship to illnesses and diseases as a result? Do people, for instance, with the smaller amounts of TMAO have less heart disease, less cancer, all of the things that you're talking about? Where's that statistical data that goes along with this? When we're talking about long-term health, for instance, I'm wondering about longevity. Is there a difference in how long people who are vegans and vegetarians live in comparison to people who are omnivorous and consume meat also? That, I think, seems like it's an obvious piece of information that ought to be in the presentation, and you don't have that. There's a lot of assertions to health risks that I think need some kind of documentation that are not really documented, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. The greenhouse gas issue kind of is your second point, and this is another one of those places where I think that you explain the concept, but proving it is another thing, and you don't really do much with the gas issue except just talk about what the process is. The water issue, that's a little bit more involved because you do give us some statistical information about water consumption and how much is involved in those particular situations. Although I don't know that we are particularly suffering from a shortage of water. I mean, we sometimes have drought conditions, but the question about whether or not there's sufficient water to supply all of the animals' needs as they are being raised for food, that seems to be like there's some assumption that we have limited resources here. Make an argument that says that we have limited resources and that the utilization of these resources for this particular purpose is problematic in some way. The argument about animals and their relative condition, there are some presuppositions here made about ethics that I think need to be developed a little bit more. You basically suggest that the space issue is problematic for animals. You're requiring us to be empathetic with animals, and I think for some animals it's easy for people to be empathetic with. For other animals, we do see them as being particularly product based, and so if you want to build this up as an emotional justification, you need to give us some way of relating to the animals in this situation. You tell us not to be fooled by the cage-free, free-range chickens because ultimately they all die. I'm like, well, so do we all, but at least they get eaten, I think that that's a little bit problematic. By the way, it undermines your argument a little bit, and this is just my being a wise ass. It undermines your argument a little bit when you talk about health and how much healthier you are when you're up there with the runny nose and the and the scratchy throat. You're saying, people who eat vegetarian, they have less colds and everything. I'm going, well, knock on wood, I haven't been sick this semester, and you have been, So it's one of those little inconsistencies that just jumps out a little bit, All right, thank you. That's good.
What was my time?
7 minutes and 1 second.